Okay, welcome, horror fam, to the Bitter Wolf, the Bitter Interviews. This is Bitter Interview number two with none other than my good friend Chris Vander Kaay. And we became good friends recently because we bonded over trauma. But what do you, hi, Chris, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yes, trauma bonding is the new, I don't know, it's the new mall, right? That's how you meet people.
Thank you, Chris, for coming. And it was really fun having you last time. I don't know if this will get published before our other conversation because I still have to finish editing that.
Oh yeah,
So we'll see.
we'll make some obscure references to something that we said last time. So if this comes out first, no one will have any idea what's going on.
Okay, we're here to talk about is it ask? Is it dot ask? Is that how you say it?
I just say ask, but I put the dot at the beginning because I figured if anybody's looking up an alphabetical list of movies, mine should come close to the top if there's a period and an A at the beginning. So that's my secret scam. I just spend an enormous amount of time looking alphabetically through lists of movies because that's what I do. I kind of consider myself a little bit of a movie curator in the sense of like I watch a lot of crap so that I can recommend the good stuff to other people. So I end up sifting through a lot. So I just notice these things on my own, you know? Something starts with an A, it's at the top. If it's a number, it's higher than that, and if it's a punctuation mark, it's even higher. So,
Well, we're going to talk about ask. I don't want to talk about the plot too much because I want you to tell us of as much of the plot as you want to tell. So, what do you want us to know about this movie?
the quick pitch of it is this is basically the monkey's paw for the influencer generation is sort of the tagline I give. But basically the way I describe it is he's a tried and somewhat failing influencer. He's trying to get a foothold in sort of the, I guess you'd say it like the hustle culture or grind culture world, and it's not working until one day he gets some very strange advice from a mysterious life coach that ends up turning his luck around, like alarmingly good. But then, as is always the case when wishes come true, there's some dark lining to that silver cloud. Did I say that wrong? There's a silver lining to a dark cloud. This is the dark cloud to that silver lining. And he finds out the hard way that some of the things that came true very easily have very bad things waiting just behind them.
It's such an amazing story, and it's such a well-rounded character too. And I think that's one of the things that just drew me into this from the very beginning of it, is you meet this character and a lot of the times, because I was talking to some people recently about found footage. And a lot of the times it's the plot contrivance for why are you seeing this footage is part of what gets people it prevents them from getting over that hump in terms of suspending disbelief. But I thought here you came up with something that's truly original and something that was also quite believable. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm glad that resonated with you because it is likewise one of the biggest issues that I have with found footage films, which is I'm never one of those people that's like, oh, I checked out of this scene because of such and such moment. But I do think if it's not a heavy lift to come up with a reason why something is happening on screen that's believable, or, why is a camera running in the sequence, go ahead and give the explanation so that it helps. But the reason that I chose the way I did, which is by and large, most of this movie is I guess what you would consider behind the scenes footage of this guy's YouTube channel. So he has a virtual assistant that edits his work and posts it and things like that. So what we're actually seeing is all of this stuff kind of dumped raw into a file, and it's being accessed by in retrospect after the events of the movie. It's being looked at by a group of people. So that's the conceit of seeing it. And the reason I did that is because I liked the idea that every once in a while we'll see one of the finished YouTube videos that he puts out into the world, but most of it is behind the scenes, because what I really liked was to be able to show what I truly believe to be true, which is that what you're seeing on an influencer's channel is almost never who they actually are. And when I get to show you both sides of that equation, then you start to see what the falsehood is. Even before his life starts changing for the better, he was already living sort of a fake dual identity, you know? And so a lot of the movie is about imposter syndrome and about the way that people present themselves to the public versus who they really are. So I thought this framing made it easier to be able to see both sides of that equation.
One of the things that make found footage to me refreshing, whenever it's done very well on a low budget, is a lot of times because it's on a low budget, they are relying on really strong performances or really intriguing plot contrivances, for lack of a better word. or some compelling story, but uh, a lot of it relies so much on the performance. So I know you've told me before that you're not an actor, and I take great offense to that because I think you are a wonderful actor. But and so I think you should follow the advice, as lame as it is, of your own motivational speaker, to just put your acting truth into the world. What do you think about that?
Well, so listen, I'm not going to say I never acted. In high school, I took an acting class, which is where I found my love of writing, actually, was in that class. But by and large, I have never been the type of person that has really gone out of my way to act, I guess is the best way to put it. I don't think
Okay.
I'm bad on camera. I just don't like that has never been. If everybody was like, if we had a group of people and were like, hey, let's make a movie, my initial instinct would not have been, please put me in front of the camera. It would have been, let me
Oh,
write this
okay.
stuff. Um, but in this case, it actually means a lot to me that you thought my performance was good because I'm not going to lie, a
Yeah.
lot of it is very close to who I am. I mean, aside from the fact that my character is literally named after me. Um, but there's a lot of, not the actual events of the story, but elements of this character that definitely touch close enough to me. The imposter syndrome is a big one. That is something that I've dealt with many times in my life. The idea of someone who wants to be seen for what they do and struggles to be seen for what they do definitely connected with me. And, I also think there is absolutely an aspect of me that is the kind of guy that is in over his head frequently in places. There's a scene where he's talking to a person who he thinks is going to be his first client, and it goes terribly for him. And that sequence was the hardest one for me to shoot because I have been in circumstances where people are very blunt with you about your level of skill or awareness or your appropriateness for a position. And that kind of stuff is sometimes hard to swallow. So I found a way to turn it around and make it funny while still being painful the way that it feels in life. Hopefully it makes it a little bit of an easier pill to swallow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great thing to highlight in terms of how horror can help people. This is something that I talk about in the Horror Mosaic Project a lot. And people talk about, like really immersing themselves into that experience is a good way for them to work through it or process it and somehow or face it. And I got to tell you, you forced me to face some of my personal fears. It's like you don't know what's going to hit people in horror because fears are so deeply personal. And you got me. I shouldn't spoil stuff. I'm sorry. Let me
I
know.
won't I won't tell if you don't. Maybe we just talk about it so obliquely that people will be like, I don't know what they mean. I gotta check this out.
Yes. Okay. We'll do it like that. So there's something that you do with a thing that we use every day to process things that we need to survive, and it just really plays to the deep-seated fear I have because of issues I've had with that thing in my life. Does that make sense to you?
That that is very well hidden. I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about, but no one else will. But yeah,
Yes.
well, what you just said a minute ago is I think one of the reasons I think horror is so powerful is sometimes you can tell what other people might think is funny. You can almost never tell what someone else will think is scary. And so you just have to operate from what you can find to be frightening to you, and then just do as good a job as you can tapping into that and hope that you will connect with that piece of fear in someone else. Like I could probably figure out a way for a punch line to work for most people, because there's a structure to it in some ways. Not everything's funny, but like you can get closer. But in horror, like one of the big things about this movie for me is the fear that you're not going to make an impact in the world. That to me, that's an existential fear more than like
Yeah.
my life is at threat. It's more like what I've done in this world ceases to exist at the moment that I do, and what have I done? What have I left behind? And so that's terrifying to me. I assume that that's probably must be terrifying to some other people. So for me, it was just
Yeah.
like, all right, well, I'm scared of that. I just got to lean into that hard. And hopefully I've done a good enough job capturing how I feel about it that other people will recognize it too.
And I think that's another aspect to why it's so compelling to watch you go through this, because you're also processing it as you're going through it, but you're processing it in a way that feels natural because of the nature of your channel.
There was an idea I had was like I don't have that many cast members. I don't have that many people I can rely on to be in a movie. But if I make a virtual assistant, the unseen secondary character through this whole film, it gives me someone to talk to. One of the things I find frustrating in found footage movies is they have a camera and they're recording everything, but we don't really get a sense of who's on the other end that's supposed to be receiving this. It's a nebulous audience. For me, I was able to use the opening scene to establish Ravi, the guy that I'm hiring who's working for me. And in some ways, for me at least, he feels like as much a real character as the guy that I'm playing because I'm
Sure.
fake for half. So I'm not that much of a real person. So this other guy that I'm talking to in some ways, even though we never see him on screen, feels like just as much a real person. I was just interested in that idea of like, I don't know, the unconventional way of creating a secondary character in a movie, even if you don't have a cast member you can fill it with.
And then Ravi is also partly responsible for creating you to the audience as well, because he's editing in such a way,
Yep.
in such a carefully crafted way. And your dynamic, it's so fascinating because you're talking about him, and you're right, because he feels real, and you almost feel their dynamic, even though he doesn't respond or anything like that. So I think that's a really smart thing that you did, to kind of fill the space.
Yeah, it allows me to have a conversation instead of just expositing, like I'm talking to Ravi as opposed to, so many movies you see a character say a thing and it's like very clear this is just the exposition moment where that piece of info needs to get across. In my case, I'm telling Ravi doesn't know, so it removes that obvious impediment of, oh, I'm just delivering this to the audience member. No, I'm delivering it to some guy that needs to know it who works for me.
I was really impressed with the writing in this movie, or what I thought was the writing in this movie. And so I started to be like, this writing is really good. And I've talked to Chris Vander Kaay in the past, and it seems really similar to when we were just talking. So my question was, is this improvised or is it writing? And will you just share with people what you shared with me?
So it actually ties back into what we were talking about regarding acting, which is that I knew not being primarily an actor, I needed to set myself up to be as much of a success as possible as a performer, even though I'm not that primarily. That coupled with the fact that so much of this movie was shot guerrilla style, meaning there's some sequences where you see where I go to an industry event, like a business event. I was actually just shooting all of those pieces during an actual business event. Like I just was at it. And when people were out of the room, I would shoot a sequence while they were gone, or I was at the hotel or the airport or whatever. So I was picking up pieces of my real life to use in this film. What I realized was that's all going to happen very fast. So I can't possibly lock myself down to a script that I have to memorize because some of those scenes I'm only ever going to get one take because it might only be 3 minutes that those guys are out at the snack bar that I'll be able to shoot in this room, or I'm not going to be able to board the plane a second time. So I knew that I had to be able to get a scene I was happy enough with and not have to go back a second time because I'm like, oh, I wrote it this way and that's a really good way of saying it and I'll never get a second take. So what I did was I just came up with a beat sheet. I think it probably ended up being about 55 bullet points of scenes that needed to happen and what needed to transpire in them. Um, but not a lot of detail. Just like here are the three emotional underpinnings of this scene, and you got to get to them. And that's all I would write. And then when I would shoot the scene, I just knew to reference I had to hit these three things at some point during the sequence. And then the rest of it was largely improvisational in the sense that I knew thematically what I was getting at, but I didn't know the words that would get me there. And that also helped my performance because it looked like I was emoting in the moment because I really was trying to figure out how to say what it is that I knew I needed to say. So it allowed me to look like that thought process was happening in real time.
I think that definitely came through in your performance, because it felt so authentic. And I know fans have found footage. This is one of the things that draws them in, which is the performance, but also because the performance feels so authentic, combined with the way that it's presented to them, of course. So,
100%.
and you worked so well with what you had, and I won't spoil the second and third acts or anything like that. But you worked very well with your resources in the final act, I'll say, to present what was happening there. And particularly with sound effects, in the moment we vaguely referenced before, that was just very painful to me.
Yeah. Well, this might blow your mind to find out that final sequence the is all shot in one unbroken take. That final scene in front of the camera, it was done in one unbroken take, and I only had one take. So that
Wow.
entire scene I had to do, I was at a friend's house. I was only able to shoot for one day. That the final sequence that takes place in that house, it's a friend's house. And it was actually shot in about 2 hours, the whole thing. Me coming in, all the security camera footage, all of that was shot in a single 2 hour window because he had to take his dogs for a walk because the dogs were too big and loud. They couldn't be in the house. So he went on a 2 hour walk and I shot in his house while he was gone.
Wow.
But that final sequence, the one where I go outside in the backyard, I won't say what I do there, but you know what I'm talking about. That whole scene where I go back and sit down in front for the final live broadcast, I only did one time. And the reason is because as we were getting ready to shoot it, it started raining outside. I live in Florida. So it started
Yep.
raining. Well, this movie was so cheap, I didn't even have a second shirt to wear, right? So the second I step out in the rain, continuity is be damned, right? My hair is soaked, my shirt is soaked. I don't have time to dry my shirt again. So I knew I had one crack at this. So that entire final sequence was done outside with my friend's waterproof cell phone, me getting rained on. And I knew I only had the one swing at the bat to get it done. Which sounds
Wow.
crazy. Like, why would you ever want to do that? But in a way, for that final sequence, it was some intense stuff. And I think that
Yeah.
the anxiety I had about like, I have to nail this because it's the only one I get, I think probably helped the energy of that scene quite a bit.
Jesus Christ, that's amazing. That definitely enhances it. And actually, it's cool that you brought up the rain because I was sitting there watching it and I was wondering, um, is this an effect? Because I've been to Florida. I've spent lots of time in Florida in my life, because my sister lives there, and so I know about those spontaneous rains and I know about how it looks and how it feels to be in it. And especially when you're just wearing a white shirt or something, it's like I know exactly how it feels. And so, but it's like you could feel it and you could see it in the way that you filmed that
But then
scene.
Florida curses you too because Florida skies always look blue even in the middle of a rainstorm. So
Right.
like I could understand people thinking that was definitely like fake, like my friend was standing off screen with a hose or something, because the Florida sky never looks like rainy, even when it's absolutely pouring
Right.
rain. It was funny. So many people have asked me that. They were like, "How did you do the rain effect?" I'm like, "That's not an effect. I just went and sat in the rain. Like I didn't have any choice."
Oh, I love that so much. And you're just like, well, this is it. I got to do it. And
Yeah.
damn, you did it. You definitely
Yeah.
did it.
But like half of this movie was really reverse engineering from real life circumstances that I just had to figure out how to use in the moment. Saying that it was a sequence where I was, well, I won't say what was happening in the foreground, but in the background, someone was being arrested by police officers in the background of a shot. That was just actually happening. We were going to shoot across the street at a school parking lot, and it was closed. So I was like, well, let's just go over there by the grocery store. As we were pulling in, I saw police officers pull up around a car and they started like basically talking to a guy, and it was clear something was going to go down. So I was like, we got to set up quick. This is going to happen in the background. And then I ended up basically, we shot that piece first, and then I went back and then I filmed the opening
Oh,
about it so that it fit to the story of why that would be happening. So
oh my
basically,
God.
I built that entire scene on the fly based on what was happening in the background of the parking lot of the Publix at the time that we pulled up. So
That's so cool. It's like that was one of the things I was going to ask you about because I was watching that scene and I was thinking, there's no way he got these cops to agree to like do this in the background while he was doing
yeah,
this. So there's something going on here, but I got it.
yeah. Can you
That's
imagine?
so
Like
cool.
I spent less than $250 on this entire film, but I somehow was able to afford to get two police cars to show up and pretend to arrest a man in the background, you know? Um, but I mean, like that's sort of the point of this whole project, though, was like if you can reverse engineer things that are already happening in life and make it look like they're tied into your story, it'll look like you put forth a lot more time, effort, and money.
It's amazing. I love that. It's like a commentary on filmmaking itself, and um, it's like it is found footage. What you
Oh,
did.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Like there's no, I mean, not that that's normal in found footage, but like there was no sets. Everything I shot was where it happened, you know?
Yeah.
If the scene takes place in a hotel, I shot it in a hotel. That's why it was written into the movie because I was there, you know? So this literally is found footage in both the genre sense and also the like descriptive sense. This is absolutely both of those things.
Oh, I love that. So that's why I got so excited when I was watching this because I'm starting to think about this stuff and then I'm getting so excited because when you get a great performance in found footage and then you get great, I'll call it great writing, for now, because it is kind of writing in a way, writing on the fly. There's so many great segments in this, and then you have like the text going over it, and then you have the different font and different things, and it's like very close attention to detail. So, can you talk about your attention to detail in this movie? Because I thought it was pretty impeccable.
So one of the things I thought was important to me was for stuff that I'm doing, my character is doing, I'm not super competent. So like when you see me on the call, trying to pitch this guy to become a client, it's clear that I don't really know what I'm doing. But this guy I hired, Ravi, I did want there to be the impression that he does actually, he's good at his job, you know? So like I've asked him to do some post-production work. Now, he's not the best in the world. He's the guy that's only getting paid 4.25 an hour from somewhere overseas. So, you know, but he's very good at what he does with the limited means that I've given him to do so. So in the few sequences where you got to see a final version of what would end up on YouTube, I knew it couldn't just be a clip of just me talking with the quick cut edits like in the rest of the movie, because then it betrays the idea there's this other character that's doing something behind the scenes. So for those couple of sequences, like the one you mentioned, the only boring people are bored monologue, that was actually recorded. I recorded it twice, not because I wanted to redo it, but because I knew one of the things I love in watching these like cheesy motivational videos that you'll see, like sometimes it'll be like a dude that's trying to teach you to like work out, and it's like a take it to the limit type of guy. There'll be one where he's like talking straight to camera and he's just looking straight down the barrel of the camera. But then there'll also be like weird motivational B-roll of him doing other things, cut in and like slow-mo and everything. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. But if I shoot this twice, two different locations, and then I can flip the shots in some frames, I can change the color or turn it to black and white. I can put huge block letters and bright colors on the screen. Then it will give that impression of there's a guy named Alex Hormozy who's like one of those like sales, guy. He's like he used to own gyms and now he's like a business entrepreneur guy. And like he has that thing like the huge words in big text coming across really fast as you're talking. And like
Yeah,
that's the kind of vibe I wanted was like I'm trying to emulate people who are very good at this. And what I'm actually saying is not particularly compel it's not groundbreaking. It's not particularly
right,
moving. But
right.
like the gross sum of all of the things technically that are being done make it feel like it's more important than it actually is. The swelling music and the big letters and the editing and everything. So
Yeah,
that for me was like a subtle commentary on, do you ever pay attention to the things that you think are powerful because they've been fashioned to make you think they're powerful, even if they actually aren't, even if they're not saying anything new to you.
right.
It's the way it's been framed to you. So, and I think there's maybe two or three sequences in that. There's one where I'm on a hammock, which I thought was kind of fun. There's the one where I'm in the car. And then I think maybe the most powerful one, which I didn't do as much like bombast in, but the sequence where I'm talking about what kind of hole will you leave in the world? There's
Yeah,
a monologue there. That
yeah,
one for me was very important to have visual changes because there's a lot of shifting emotional content in that one. And I
right.
could have just done it. I mean, I did record it as just a single monologue, but I knew it had to have some change up to to go on the roller coaster journey of what he's kind of discovering in the moment. So all
Yeah,
of that, I didn't plan it when I shot it. I didn't know what it was going to be. I just shot it, and then I knew I would figure it out in post how to do something interesting. So yeah, I would say the majority of the hours on this film actually absolutely were in post because I
yeah.
don't think I never did more than a third take on any scene. Every single scene was done in one or two takes. I never shot a shot a third time except for one shot where it was very specific timing I had to do with the opening of a door to get right, and I had to shoot it three times,
Hmm.
but that's it.
I thought it was real technically impressive too. I thought for sure that some of these had been done more than once, so that's really cool. Really cool to know that. But I wanted to go back and talk a little bit about the segments that you were mentioning and how it goes from a lot of bombast in the beginning, with a lot of this hamming up the motivational aspect of it, the speaking in generic ways that aren't really exactly useful. Which he has that opening. I think it's a Skype session maybe or something with that guy
Mhm.
who just kind of calls
Yep.
him out. There's a line that I love, and I was like, this had to be you can't have just riffed this line, but I guess you did. Um, you don't just need a yes man. You need a yes man who says yes when yes is the answer. Is that like a common axiom in this business?
That became an axiom the second that I thought of it, which was during that scene. I just There was something really funny to me about the idea that everybody says you don't want yes men, but I was like, how can him being the sort of like attention grubber that he is on this call, is there a way that he can try and spin that like that's a positive thing? And I was like, well, that's how I would do it in this moment. Is I would be like, yeah, I'm saying yes to everything that you're saying, but that's only because you're right. You know what I mean? Like he's
I,
even in the midst of that, he's like trying to take a victory lap about how this guy's got all of his shit together. If only he would just hire me and give me some money, you know? So there's
yeah,
definitely like that desperate, there's a thirstiness to everything that he does where he wants people to think he's an expert, but he also will just agree with anything that they tell him if they're going to pay him to be their expert. Um,
right.
and that feels true to me about a lot of people in the marketing industry and in the motivational
Sure.
industry. Like you believe something to a degree, but if someone pays you enough money, you're going to agree with whatever the hell they tell you because you want the money more than you really need to put your quote unquote truth into the world.
Sure. And I think that probably transcends those industries. I would deign to imagine.
Yes, I have no
So
doubt. Those are the only places I've witnessed it. But yeah, you're right. I'm sure that goes well beyond there.
and that's why I think this feels so universal too, whenever you're watching it. And um it's just it's loads of fun. It's like these lines are hilarious. This is a very wait, what is this one from now? I forgot the context. I wrote this down. Maybe you can help me remember the context. This is a very expensive hotel room. Does anybody know why this is happening?
Okay, so yeah, there's bubbles, air bubbles
Oh
bubbling
yeah.
up out of the toilet. And so that was a very interesting sort of opportunistic situation. That was actually happening in when we moved into a new house. So it was brand new construction. So my assumption is there was just air in the toilet line, water was just coming in for the first time. So it was just bubbling up from the toilet. And I was like, that's the weirdest thing. I've never seen this before. And it just kept going. It was for like 45 seconds. It just kept happening. So I was just recording. And then as it was happening, I thought, wait a minute, I can use this in a scene somehow. So I zoomed in a little bit so you couldn't see the rest of the bathroom. And then I commented, I'm staying in a very expensive hotel. Does anybody know why this is happening? And then I just cut that in. And even though it just looks like a regular toilet, you've seen sequences before it and after it that happen in this fancy hotel room. You don't do the math that doesn't look like a toilet that would be in that hotel room. So, it's that sort of, I don't know what you call it, the Ed Woodization of, you piece together things from places that are disparate. And if you've done a good enough job, hopefully nobody notices. Now, Ed Wood didn't always do a good enough job that nobody noticed, but in my case, I think I got away with it.
Yeah, you definitely got away with it. It hit perfectly. And a lot of these little things that I guess it sounds like they were, like you said, found footage in real life, and then you found a way to incorporate it into the movie somehow. And they wouldn't work without the right timing, and sometimes they're in there for comic timing. What was the other one I thought was really, really good comic timing that was similar to that? I think it was like you were looking out back at the house and the dog is in the window. You remember
Okay.
that?
Yeah,
I can't
I'm doing a very
remember.
serious monologue about a potential tragedy that's just taken place in my life, and then I just look up and I go, "What is this son of a bitch?" And then I turn the camera, and it's just this dog staring straight at me out the window. Tiny little white dog, but like he's got the devil's eyes. Um, yeah, very sweet dog, but he doesn't read on camera as the friendliest dog ever.
Well, yes, and neither does my dog, by the way. But it's like it's one of those moments where you could be filming it and you're sending that picture out of, or you're sending that video out of context to your friends and saying, "Look at my cute dog," you know.
Mhm.
And then, but if you just edit it in a different way, it has a completely different connotation.
Yeah, 100%. I'm trying to remember. There was a sequence, it was in the original cut. I don't remember if it made the final version now because I had so many cuts, but there's a sequence where there were just two ducks walking towards the front door. Yeah. So that was shot 3.5 years before this movie was made. There was just, I was going to an event one day and there were ducks just walking sort of towards the door. So I made the joke that you hear me make on camera there. I said, you guys heading inside, there's coffee in the lobby if you want any. And I just thought it was funny to record. I just sent it to, my wife and my friends as a joke. And then one day I was just scrolling. I do this sometimes where I'll just mine through old videos that I've shot to see if there's anything I can use in there. And I was like, this is insane. Of course I'm going to use this because I'm going to an event
Yeah.
and I literally referenced that they're going inside to an event. So yeah. And a lot of those little moments are the pressure valves that release the tension from the rest of the
Uh,
movie. Like I got to do a bunch of exposition. My character doesn't know what's going on. He's worried, whatever. Throw this little moment in. It gives everybody the ability to laugh and see the absurdity and step back for a second before you dive back into something heavy. So,
Exactly.
um, but yeah, so technically, I guess this movie has been like 4 years in the making when I think about the fact that that clip I shot, years ago, not intending to use it for anything, but I just ended up, repurposing it because it was there.
Another great example of found footage. That's so awesome. I love this. That was literally the next one on my list that I was going to ask you about was you guys in early today talking about the ducks. And then after that, I think soon after that sequence was I think the hammock sequence was the Are You a Destination? That was
Yep.
hilarious. I mean, but there was also like an evolved, what I was getting back to a little bit earlier was um, these segments having that evolving heaviness a little bit. So it starts out with that bombast, and then it slowly evolves as he's starting to see how this is more about him, what's going on inside of him. But by the end, it just becomes very heavy, right? So I think that's also part of why this is so effective because it's like it's funny, but then you have the pathos involved as well, and you have this rich character that you're discovering as you go along with all this footage that's been compiled from your real life. And I think that's the epitome of what found footage is.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that absolutely means a lot to me. I knew one of the important things for me with this project was um, this sounds terrible, but the good thing about found footage is that it's the democratization of filmmaking. Anybody can go out and make one, and that's awesome. What's bad about that is that anybody can go out and make one. And oftentimes they just do, and they don't have an idea very clearly, and there's no real building tension, there's no interesting characters. And so like it's great that there's that lowered threshold for people to be able to get across, but it also means that people don't put as much effort into making their thing original. So one of the things was very important to me was I wanted the audience to constantly feel a little bit out to sea in terms of like I don't know what's going to come next from this story. For a little while, you're not even sure where it's heading in terms of like, why am I watching this guy? Like, what's it building towards? And then when the thing happens, when he gets something slid underneath the door of his hotel room, is the first clue that we're going into strange territory. But then for me, it was I want every new piece of information after that or new sequence after that to change something, but change it in a way that the last change would not have given you the expectation that this would be the next one. Because the way I look at it is, I was going to be on camera talking for a lot of this movie. So, in order for them to be patient to sit through the next 3 or 4 minutes worth of dialogue sequences, I had to drop one really strange thing in here, the real head scratcher that'll leave them a few minutes. So, the strange thing that comes under the door, the sequence in the jacuzzi pool, the strange phone calls with my motivation or my life coach. There's all these, and then I think the final sequence being silent for huge chunks of it, like desperately
Right.
uncomfortably silent. All of those were intentional choices to try and push away from what the expectation of this subgenre of found footage is. Is like normally, yes, you'll have sequences that have white noise in it, but it's never no sound at all. And I was very interested in the idea of like, well, that will make people uncomfortable. How do I weaponize that? And it's the longer that silence goes on, the more uncomfortable it becomes. Or in a sequence where like the sequence that took place in front of the grocery store, the revelation of what seems like a funny scene, and then the revelation of why that funny scene is happening becomes very dark and very uncomfortable. That for me, the goal was constantly just how do I keep people off balance with this story? So that's part of I think what you were saying is like it was easy for me to like take all these disparate pieces of my life and build a story out of it because the goal was they're supposed to feel from moment to moment uneven and confusing.
As you were saying this, I was thinking also about the naturalness of the way that you employed the different mediums in which this is presented. So, for example, you're talking about the silent portions, and I won't talk about that in great detail, but the way that these silent portions are presented feel naturalistic as well to the medium and how it would be viewed. So, the experience that the audience is having is unnerving because it's silent, it's outside of comfort zone. And so once you remove that, um, they're watching it like how you would be watching this footage.
The removal of sound also is the removal of information in some ways. And so that's fun because so much of the movie has been I'm telling you things, you're learning things from me, you're interacting with me as I talk to Ravi. So for that final chapter to feel so suddenly both emotionally distanced from your character, circumstantially distanced, like literally in the footage. I'm much further away in that final act because of where the camera placement is. And then also I am distant from explanation. So like everything seems further away in Act 3 than it was in Acts 1 and 2. And that was very much intentional because the goal for me is like normally like it becomes more intense and more lean in as you get to the end. And I'm like, well, what can it be scary to do the opposite? Can it be scary that we get further and further away from something? And then in the final sequence, when the truly terrible thing happens, we juxtapose back and forth between an extreme close up of a terrible thing happening and then very distant, silent shots of the same thing happening, so that your brain has trouble that with that dysregulation between the uncomfortable emotional reality in color up close versus the black and white distant single shot. That was really fun, sort of playing with that idea.
That's really great. And it definitely enhances the experience of taking that scene in. So that's why everyone needs to watch this movie. And because that's the ride you go on when you're watching Ask is a great one. It's funny, it's scary, it's disturbing, it's weird, it's goofy. It's all the things that Chris Vander Kaay is himself. Is that right?
I'll take yeah, I'll take that. There's not a single adjective you listed that I would not proudly
I
proclaim for
ho-
myself.
I hope not. I hope I didn't say like bloody or something disgusting.
Hey, listen, I can own all of those things. Like I've been called much worse than that, and for absolutely for valid reasons. So I'll take all of
Okay.
those. Those were much better than the ones I normally get. So
Oh, I wrote cop scenes. How? Question mark. He told us about that. That's fantastic. That's like one of my favorite
yeah,
things. You will be the spokesface of something. So I wanted to bring this up because I've done this. These exact socks that you presented, I've done this. Looks like the exact same pair, except with my dog's face on it. Um, so I know exactly what you're talking about here. And I just wanted to say I have that same pair.
yeah. Well, and that's another circumstance where I was like, I had something in my possession that I did not buy, that I did not create myself, but had been created, existed. I spent no money on, but I thought with a little bit of reverse engineer, figure this out. I can put something in the movie that people will assume I had to have spent money to do, right? Therefore,
Right.
it will give me the credit of the production design or the production effort. So, like one giant pillow that had my face and my dog's face on it, pairs of socks that had the picture of my dog and a picture of myself on it, a Louisville Slugger that had my name emblazoned on the side of the bat. All of those things were gifts that were given to me because of what I do in my industry. Because marketers are constantly trying to get your attention. They have a thing called giftology, which is like shower people with presents so they remember you and
Right.
then they'll work with you kind of thing. So I got all kinds of weird presents from people for that exact reason. Except for the bat. The Louisville Slugger was a gift from my current boss, and he's fantastic, and I love that bat. But
Wow. Okay.
had all those other weird things, and I was like, here's one other thing with my name on it. I got to put it in there. But anyway, I just reverse engineered from like all of these weird gifts that I got that like I'm kind of embarrassed of. I don't wear the socks. The pillow is hidden in the corner. I don't let anybody see it because it's like weirdly egocentric to have pillows or socks with your own face on it. But I thought with this movie, that makes sense. This guy would want something like
Yeah.
that. So just utilize it. And so again, like many of the plot elements, like one of the huge plot elements we haven't talked about, which is I guess you could say a major physical change that my character goes through from one scene to another, um, was a thing that was happening in my life. And I just reverse engineered the story so that one part of the story took place all before that, and then everything else happened after that. And so I actually built the movie to hinge on this one very specific, huge
Oh,
change in my life,
wow.
and then wrote the
Okay.
movie and then filmed it in two halves to build around that one moment. I come from the Robert Rodriguez school of filmmaking. I used to watch all of his like behind the scenes making of stuff when he did El Mariachi and Desperado and all those movies. He would always shoot like a 10-minute film school, which is sort of like a walkthrough of how do you make your movie look more expensive and interesting than it is. And one of his big things was like, what do you already have? What do you have at your disposal that other people wouldn't have necessarily and therefore wouldn't think to put in a movie, or if they wanted to, they'd have to spend money on. So like in his case, He knew the local newscaster at a news station, so they could shoot at the news station. He knew a guy that drove a bus for a living, so in one scene they had a bus in it, and that would have been expensive if he'd had to shoot it. So I just tried to do the super low budget version of the same thing, which is like I have a bunch of weird props in my house. I'm going to this location. This big deal thing is happening in my life that's going to change my physical appearance. I can use that as a touch point, flashpoint between Act One and Acts Two and Three. And really, it was just a matter of line all of those up, see how you can use them and fit them into a story, and then just go for it, you know?
That only adds a layer to my understanding of the ending of the movie, of course, and how deeply personal that must be for you too.
Yeah, 100%. That final sequence was touch and go to shoot for reasons which we can't talk
Right.
about without giving away a large plot point, which but you and I can talk about afterwards. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
and again, yet another piece of what made the shoot what made my performance effective because putting myself into real circumstances that would make me feel anxiety or make me feel concern about safety and things like that, that all read in the performance. And
Yeah.
so in some ways, I could take a victory lap about the performance being good, but I also know that what I essentially did was I put myself in circumstances that were going to elicit the kind of emotion I needed for the moment, and then I just actually felt the way I felt. And thankfully that sort of lines up.
Well, that's really interesting because it's always, I've talked to a few actors in the last year, and it's always interesting to hear how they're able to get into that space where they need to get to do the thing. You know,
Yeah.
we're going to talk
Yeah.
about Ask all year long, folks. That's what we're going to do. We're going to get everyone to watch it because I think they need to. I talked to Mike and Serial. Um, he loved this movie as well, and so I think we're gonna get people to watch it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He and Angel from Voices from the Mausoleum were probably the first two
Yes.
people that I knew outside of friends and family that had seen it, and both huge supporters. In fact, I think it was either Angel or Mike that introduced me to you to begin with.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so they've been huge supporters. It's that has been one of the great discoveries for me. Is I'm not I don't tend to be a joiner inner in a lot of things. I believe, though I've never been diagnosed, I think that I am somewhere on the autism spectrum, and I definitely have some degree of ADHD. So I'm not normally like a joiner inner guy, and I don't keep track of hanging out and interacting with people a lot. So I've not been in a lot of communities. So I didn't realize there was such a strong and loyal support system in the found footage arena, but there really is, and more so even than horror films. Fans are very supportive, but even the subs category of that of the found footage fans they're incredibly supportive of anything. They're always searching it out. Um, they'll go to like absurd lengths to try and find the copy of a film that they heard
Yeah.
one guy recommend to them 6 years ago, and it just hasn't been available.
Right.
But then they find out that there's a German bootleg release that has only been, only ever been released once, and it can only be played on an all-region player, and they'll hunt it down because it's their white whale.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great energy, but never really a negative energy in the way that some fandoms will attract that. So
Right.
I don't know, it's been really nice feeling the support on that other end when I didn't realize it existed as a fan. And now that I know, I've really sort of leaned into it and been finding great new titles I didn't know about as a result. But being one of the titles that people are talking about is very exciting in that community.
Yes, and I think it's just gonna build over time, and I know this was your first feature film, but I hope that you've got more in mind, possibly.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, I think as we speak, I want to say I have four projects that are in various states of production, pre-production or post-production. One of which
Okay.
is an actual documentary, so that doesn't really count. It's a documentary about the making of found footage films, sort of
Oh.
I don't know what you call it, a tutorial sort of a thing, like a walkthrough of how you do it yourself.
Oh, awesome.
But then
Yeah.
the other three are all fake documentary or found footage projects. So yeah, so there's a lot of stuff on a lot of burners running right now.
That's super exciting. I'm so excited to see what you do next. This was a really I can't say exciting again. I can't think of another word right now. But fill in the blank for exciting. This was really exciting.
Scintillating. I'm going to
Um,
say that. That's probably not right, but I like
Thank
that word.
you. Thank you. Like whenever I'm not writing, it seems like my brain shuts off because I'm so used
It
to.
saves it. It saves all the good stuff for when you're going to put it on paper. That's how your brain works, man. They're like,
exactly.
if you're not writing right now, I'm not giving you any of the goods, you know?
Oh, I did write down this. A couple of guys hanging out on a pair of socks. That's a follow-up to our segment about the socks. Um, I love that line.
My beloved passed on dog Gatsby. He was a very sweet boy, and now he has a
Oh,
co-starring role in this movie. Probably the third largest performance. There's me, and then there's Dan, who's on the phone call, and then probably my dog, who appears on Socks and a Pillow, which is probably the next longest performance in the movie.
hey, what about the parents?
Oh yeah, well, so those are actually my wife's parents. They're my
Oh, okay.
in-laws, and yeah, they they were kind enough to let me shoot them in a cameo. And I said, you know, if you let me do this, I'm just going to keep coming back. So be warned, you're going to be in whatever the
Oh,
next thing is too. So
did
they're great like that. They've been super supportive.
did they have fun doing that?
They did, yes. In fact, they were the first ones to ever watch a cut of it, aside from those of us who were involved.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
and yeah, it's of course it's fun.
Yeah.
Some idiot son-in-law of yours comes over to your house for a half an hour one afternoon, and then 7 months later, you're watching a movie that he slapped together from pieces that you're in now. So
I thought they did a great job, even though they didn't have a lot to do, but it still was effective. All right. Well, Chris, that's all I have for my questions. Do you have any final thoughts that you want people to know about this movie?
So the only thing I would say, it's not about this movie specifically, but it's about movies like the film that I made, which is twofold. One, the
Yeah.
reason I made this movie is because I wanted not only to entertain people, obviously that's the first goal of a film, but I also wanted to inspire people to feel like this is a thing they can go do for themselves. I tried to spend as little money as possible, not because I don't have it, like, I have a good job. I don't need to do this to make a living. I did it because my goal was to make people feel like this is achievable even when you don't have a budget, when you don't have resources. You can still come up with a great idea and then figure out how to use your creativity to create something without having to spend money on it. So I say $250 was how much the movie cost, but it was honestly closer to like $30. The rest of the money was spent on film festival entries. Um, so the movie really was as close to free as a movie tends to get. But so that's the first thing I want to tell you is if you're interested, watch this movie if for no other reason than as a teaching tool to see how you can go do it yourself. But the second thing about that I would ask is whether it's this movie or it's another indie film, they all of them live and die by you sharing your passion for it with other people. And I have spent since the year 2008, and anytime anybody asks me for a recommendation for a movie, I recommend the movie Pontypool. It's one of my favorite films of all time. It's one of my four favorite films. It's a fantastic Canadian single location film. And I recommend it to everybody who ever asks me for a recommendation, even if I know they're probably not going to like it, only because I love the movie so much and I just want as many other people to have seen it as possible. Please do that with the stuff that you like as well. I've been lucky enough to have a few early champions for this film, and it has been fantastic. Everybody who makes a film, especially on this level, they're not doing it because they're going to get rich. They're not doing it for any other reason that they love making movies and they're trying to say something that they want other people to hear. So if it means something to you, please go to IMDb or go to Letterboxd, do a review, share it on social media, like try and let other people know about the passion that you have for something because that's really the only way that movies like this will ever find their audience. So again, it'd be great if it was for my movie, but no matter whose movie it is, if it's a small film, Marvel probably doesn't need your help spreading the word, but everybody else could use it nowadays. So if there's a small film that you love, please make sure that you're championing it to people who listen to you or people who are looking for recommendations, because that's the way that something has a life in a world where there's an endless number of options. Stuff just gets lost in the mix. So that's all I would say is if anything, if this movie makes you think anything, it's that you can do it yourself, and that if you like someone else who did it, please share what they did.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris. And I think it is a really important reminder to support independent artists and independent artists working in horror for our community. Because it's just going to get harder and harder out there. The forces are always working against you to create things and to make things that are challenging to the status quo in whatever way that it is. And I think independent art is its own challenge to the status quo. So we need to support each other and it keeps our community stronger. But thank you for coming here today and talking about your awesome movie. And we will do our part at the Bitter Wolf to share it, and we're going to have you back on the Horror Mosaic, and we're going to feature our conversation that we had a few weeks ago eventually. and all of that.
No, but you're listen. You're already out here doing God's work, man. I really appreciate it. Before I even knew who you were, and I came along and saw the backlog of stuff that you've done, you're already doing exactly what I'm talking about. It's fantastic. So I appreciate what you're doing so much.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you so much for coming here. I can't wait to talk to you again soon.
Absolutely, man. I look forward to it.